manage email and productivity helps to govern what we talk about. To protect the identity, we have the Azure Active Directory in place. To protect the device, I have the mobile device management solution in place. To protect the application, I have the Azure Information Protection in place. And to govern the data, I have the right management system. Let me walk you through to the portal of that we just spoke about so that it actually gives you an insight how you can achieve all this tasks that looks to you pretty complex, but they are not. I can give you an assurance while I walk you through. Let me take you to the portal right away so that we talk about quickly of the experience of from the user perspective and from the administrator perspective. I'm going to toggle back and forth from this presentation to the browser now. If you have any question, guys, feel free to put it on the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them while we speak. Okay, I'm already logged in onto my security console where I have a failure on my sign in that's logged on. That's my test domain. The portal remains the same. It's just that it has given few added interface. The UI has been kind of a dark and the light theme that gives you pretty much experience of the changed environment. Let me take you to the protection.office portal that gives you the control of all the policies that we were talking about. I have this information governance in place. It takes you to the dashboard where it gives you the insight of the activity in your environment. It gives you the label Activity Explorer Blade. We haven't talked about the labels and how it helps you effectively manage the right management system. We'll cover when we move back onto our presentation. Let me browse onto the portal where I've connected my two virtualized app onto the portal that gives you an insight how the activity is logged and how it is effective from the administrative perspective to understand the behavior and the pattern. So, guys, I'm bouncing between portals back and forth on the tab that are open only because I'm logged in with an enterprise highest SKU, that's E5 licenses. So the portal may vary for you when you try and toggle onto your portal because every offering is different with the license that you procure or the license that you use. So please mind when you browse the portal with the active license that you have. Let me take you to the Cloud Apps Security portal. That's the centralized management of your environment that gives you the insight of the activity that is happening in your environment. All right, let me key in my password real quick. Oops, my bad. 1 second, guys. I have the MFA, that's the multi-factor authenticator, enabled on my account. I'm showing it to you guys for a reason because that's how you secure your sign-on nowadays with the modern workplace. That gives you an added layer of security to ensure that you only authenticate the guy that you want to authenticate by adding up an MFA security to the identity. I haven't set up this account. This is just for testing purpose. All right, we are at the portal where we're gonna look or we will have the complete insight about our environment. Okay, great. On my left blade, I have this discovery, investigate, and control. They are nothing but the solutions that are inbuilt features with this portal that actually helps you to investigate. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a centralized management portal for your environment. So let me take you to the investigate blade and to the app portal where I have this two collaboration done previously for this testing purpose. I've connected my Office 365 app and my Azure platform. Okay. I can also connect some third-party apps that are readily available, like the Amazon Web Services, Cisco, GitHub, WebEx, that's yeah, with Cisco, Dropbox, and whatnot. By connecting those third-party applications to this portal, I can gain a complete insight about the activity. Okay, so let's go to the activity log and see how it looks like. Okay, a while ago, while we were addressing this webinar, all right, it has logged this activities for us. Let me quickly open something real quick so that you get to see. Okay, that's the chart available, and that's the active user count who may be signed on to the portal or who has signed in a while ago, and the behavior has been captured. So that's where you gain the insight of the activity, and it helps you to identify the risk, mitigate the same, and optimize the environment. All right, guys, so let's go back to the portal and touch base on the information protection topic, and I'll take you back to the portal once we are covered that topic. All right, let me go back and toggle to the portal. Okay, great. Now that we have covered and spoken about the centralized management system, let us move further and talk about how this layered approach security will help you by defining a number of policies. First thing first, conditional access is kind of an added security to all that we have been speaking about. Conditional access are nothing but some if and then statement given to your rule. For example, Mr. Bob is allowed to sign on to the SharePoint, maybe denied to access or save the files over OneDrive, you know, and that's this mobile application management, all right, that has given the confidence to the user to encourage on to the bring your own device model and ensure that the personal data stays in the personal space and the corporate data stays in the corporate storage, which has given the administrator also the righteous methods and the approach to safeguard the asset and the safeguard the data. For example, I'm accessing my email on my phone and I have copied the data on to my personal space of the phone. Maybe with the policy that if that is allowed, I will be able to do so. If that's denied, I cannot do that. All right. I try to be smart. I try to paste it onto the Word document and then try to save it onto some other place. That's denied either. So maybe I may not be able to allow to copy the data of my corporate to my personal storage or to my personal apps. The only thing that I'm allowed to do so is to only edit the file as defined for the business need and then save it on to the corporate repository. That's the beauty of the conditional access, is giving the mobile application management a complete control to achieve the business goal that is defined by the right information protection and the management system. With the multiple layers of protection, it has become easy for the ID administrator to govern the identity. As you travel, you don't have to travel physically. However, your identities travel from one application to another based on your sign-on pattern. The MDM policies can manage the log, and the information protection policies can be applied to the content to the users that is working with, and ensure that everything is in the strictest confidence. With that being said, we have what we're going to talk about now is the Microsoft Defender ADP, that's the Advanced Threat Protection. Guys, as I mentioned, the security revolves around the four major elements. That's your identity, data, and the behavior. With this automated security in place, the data that is spanned across the environment, maybe your NAS box, maybe your storage over the cloud, maybe the storage onto the physical device of the asset itself, it actually gives the insight to the administrator to assess the vulnerability. It gives the insight to the administrator to mitigate the risk and enforce the policies that are right for the business to achieve the goal. At the same time, with the use of the Intune for the mobile device, uh, for example, guys, if I were to travel with my phone, that was given by the corporate, and for many good reason, or maybe, accidentally I missed onto my phone in my travel and transit, and I have nothing on me. Yeah. So I may be worried about the data on my phone. What am I gonna do when I've lost the device? Maybe I could reach out to my IIT and see how they can help me. Yeah, the ID personnel who has the Intune deployed into the environment can actually safeguard the data. Okay, it gives you the facility, or it gives you the function to wipe, restore the data out of the box only if that's in the environment. If that's not in the environment, then there's a likely chances the data may land into an unrestricted environment or an unauthorized person who should not be the right owner. you know so it gives the business the complete confidence when they have all this offerings in place, that gives them a complete insight that is actually right to achieve all the common goals or that has been defined by the compliance and the stakeholders. With the bring your own device model, the user now also have the confidence, if they lose on to anything, they can reinstate what has been lost with the help of this application in the environment. The security model of Microsoft is simple at the same time. When I say it is simple at the same time, yes, it is simple for a user because he's at the front end of the application. He doesn't know what's going on in the back end or the engine. When a user receives an email, you know, he may be allowed to open an attachment. He may not be allowed to open the attachment. At the same time, the beauty of the advanced threat protection, or the beauty of the compliance in place, it gives the customer an insight, or the administrator an insight about the behavior of the mail flow. For example, guys, if I were to receive an email from a compromised user or compromised account, and that email contains a suspicious activity, with the help of advanced threat protection and with the help of URL filtering, my administrator now has the governance to control such unwanted access and control this unwanted behavior, to ensure that the email is been received to the legitimate mailbox and the sender is authenticate. May not be the sender could be authenticate for various good reason. However, the data he's trying to exchange is legitimate. With ADP, in place. It has integrated with a lot of applications like your cloud-based solution, maybe your Office app, maybe your sales CRM, maybe your uh, storage box like Google Drive or SharePoint. All is monitored when you have this measured services enabled, because it helps you collect the data which is gone past the application layer. With modern workplace, we are only talking about the data protection, identity, security, and governance. With the compliance, it has become imperative for us to define a framework now so that we can govern what we actually want to and not what has been deployed in an environment, because most of the time the environment is overkill. I may use a firewall, define a policy. However, the policy can be overwritten by another policy. That's where the clash is all about. However, from such behavior, it helps us to analyze, it helps us to learn from our own implementation. It also helps us to detect the abnormal behavior, as I mentioned earlier. Last but not least, guys, it helps us to alert, investigate, and mitigate the risk. Let us see how this engine works behind the picture and how it does help us to gain insight on the behavior. We have this antivirus engines in place, and then once we have this engine in place, as I mentioned earlier, for an example again, I received an email from Bob. To my knowledge, it has come to my mailbox. It is my duty now to open that email blindly or give a thought whether the content of the mail is legitimate that I should be able to open, or what if I notify somebody to a naked eye, it may looks like a legitimate email. However, the person who has sent you that email is not the legitimate guy, or the content is not good to use. Once I click the link, I may be bombarded with the virus notification, or I may not be able to use the application itself. However, when you have the ADB in place, it actually gives you the function to filter the URL. It gives you the ability to discard that email. It also gives you the ability to notify the end user that there's an email coming to your mailbox, which may be legitimate or may not be legitimate. And then once you have everything in place, it gives you a complete insight whether the sender who has sent you an email comes from a legitimate domain. If not, then the domain ranking can be diminished, and that can give a hit back to the domain as well. With that being said, we've been talking about the Azure Information Protection. Let's see what Azure Information Protection is all about. Azure Information Protection gives you an added security to categorize the data based on its severity and label it so that the management of the data becomes easy, simple, and efficient. Well, it has laid security onto the perimeter level and onto the identity level as well. But with the new normal, as you know, that we have an on-prem environment because we have not fully adopted cloud as the solution, we need to consider the traditional environment when we talk about the Azure Information Protection, a cloud offering. Okay, so when we talk about cloud offering solution, that is the Azure Information Protection, I talk about how it has classified and identified the data that can be labeled by the criticality. The criticality can be severe to moderate to low or high. That all depends on the workload. When I say it all depends on the workload, I mean the data that is important to the business, the data that is important to the department or to the person itself. Now, it helps you to classify, it helps you to attach a label, and it also helps you to encrypt the same. When I say it helps you to encrypt, I mean it actually add on a security log to the attachment that can be only enabled by the person who has been given the permission to do so. I'll walk you through how you can achieve the goal by applying the Azure Information Protection label to the data share. With the introduction of the Cloud App Security Portal, the portal, guys, that we saw earlier is what we are talking about now. It gives you the complete visibility, the control, and the leverage to mitigate the risk. With modern cloud app security, you can discover and assess risk easily, quickly, control them at the real time, protect your information, detect threat. Last but not the least, guys, with the help of data loss prevention policy, it also adds another layer of security. So guys, just imagine, all right, what we've spoken again. We have spoken about the data loss prevention that gives you an added security to protect the information of the business. We spoke about Intune. We spoke about the mobile device management solution that can be deployed in the environment to govern the asset. We also spoke about mobile application management. So with all this solution in place, the business is at the win situation when it consider the security, because the length and depth, as I mentioned, with the defense and depth, the security that the Microsoft has to offer within the ecosystem is pretty secure. So let us also see, with the DLP in place, the new policy actually give you the right to control the data storage location. When I say it gives you the control to save the data onto the storage, there, the place where the data should be was the right example when we spoke a while ago. We spoke, right? The Bob user should be only saving the data to the corporate OneDrive and not to the personal. It gives you the choice, as I mentioned earlier, to save the data onto the SharePoint or to apply more added security onto the storage repository. With that being said, we come to an end of a Q&A round that begins now. We come to an end of a discussion that has covered all the aspects of security. However, I want to touch base really quick on to one thing that I did not cover in the presentation that I want to talk about now when we move on to the portal right away. All right? Yeah, right away. Let me toggle back to the Azure Information Protection portal that I has to be browsed. Okay, let me go to the portal now. 1 second. I think that's there. Okay, to access Azure Information Protection, you can directly do so within the security portal or within the protection.office.com site. However, I'm going to go the other way around. I'm going to sign into the Azure portal so that I can give you a glimpse of the Azure portal quickly. I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, so we are the tenant where this is purely used for our M365 testing. On the search engine box, I'm going to type Azure Information Protection. So what I'm doing here, I'm trying to create a label just to classify a policy. What is the policy that we're trying to define now? We're trying to define a policy that will not let the user forward an email or that will restrict the user to send the attachment. That's what we're trying to do now. Okay, so once I have this, the web interface open, okay, onto the portal, once you sign in, once you have the right privileges. To do so, the first thing first that you need to do is to activate the information protection. To do so, you go to the protection activation blade, you activate the service, and thus we can start using them now. All right, so let's quickly get this done before we come to our conclusion. Quickly, I'm going to create a label. Okay, add a new label. I'm going to test this. Okay, demo label for testing. Says confidential. Right. I'm gonna select a predefined color, maybe green, and I'm quickly gonna go with default settings because there are many such configuration needs to be done, and that's kind of a different topic altogether for discussion. All right, so I'll save this label, let the label be saved, and let's see how soon we can apply a policy. All right, so that's taking quite some time. Okay. All right, so my label is ready for the policy that I'm going to define now. I'm going to go back to the policies blade, add a new policy. All right, guys, here I'm just walking through the choices here. I'm just not creating the policy right now. However, I want to show you the tab that we just spoke about, that the user should not be able to forward that attachment. So how you will achieve that goal using the Azure Information Protection. Again, I'm going to name this policy as demo testing description. Let me write that down real quick. Should not be forwarding an email. Okay. Okay. Once you have the label created, once you have named the policy, don't forget, guys, there should be a scope where you need this policy to be applied, and they are nothing but their own users. So from the groups, I'm going to select one user very fast. Let me see. Okay, who is available? Let me see if I can find myself. I think so. I should be. All right, there I am. Okay, I selected myself. Okay, once the scope has been defined, this is the place where you do your key value pair or the attributes to the properties. Now, do I send the logging to the Azure Information Protection Analytics now? I'm doing no for now because I'll have to configure a quickly storage account. So I'm going to pass that option now. What is the next choice that I have? All documents and email must have a label. Maybe yes. Users must provide justification to set a lower classification label. So I'm going to pass a choice now. Okay. What am I doing? I'm trying to put a policy that will disable the do not forward button onto the Outlook ribbon. And this is what this is what I was actually talking about, guys. I have the choice. If I enable it, the ribbon in my Outlook, maybe I can take you there real quick onto my new mail. The forwarding choice might be disabled. However, I haven't applied to it now because that's the different topic for discussion altogether. So guys, with this, I conclude my speech for the day. I hope this session was informative and thank you for coming in. If you have any questions, please put it on the chat box now. I'll be happy to address them all. If any of you want to have further engagement of any of the topic that has been interested or fascinated to you, I'll be happy for a quick engagement to deep dive on what we've covered. Our support email address, my personal email address, is on the screen. Back to you guys for any questions that I'm happy to answer now. I think there aren't any questions coming my way. So Maria, are we good to conclude?
Yes, we can conclude this session. Thank you all for joining.
All right, great. Thank you all for coming in, and I'm happy to hear your feedback. Thank you all for coming in today. I conclude my session. Thank you once again.